The night I rejected her, the snow was coming down in silence. I remember that detail more than any other. Not the torchlight on the stone, not the faces of my council, not the treaty scroll open on the table behind me, just the silence of the snow outside the high windows of Ashenvale's great hall, and Saren standing very still in the center of the floor, her hands at her sides, her chin level. I had rehearsed the words I told myself they were necessary. The Northern Alliance required a political match, and the bond. The pull my wolf had felt the moment she stepped into the hall 3 weeks before, carrying her healer's satchel and asking quietly where she might leave her things. The bond was inconvenient. That is the word I used to myself. Inconvenient. I said the words in front of the full pack. I used the formal tongue so every wolf in that hall would understand. I told her the fated mate bond was acknowledged and refused. I told her the pack of Ashenvale required a different match. I told her she was free to go. She did not cry. She did not beg. She looked at me once. A single, clear look, as if she were memorizing my face for some other purpose, some accounting I did not yet understand. And then she turned and walked out through the great doors into the snow. My wolf did not move. He had gone somewhere I could not reach. I married the Alliance's choice 4 months later. It was a correct match. She was capable and calm and entirely wrong, and we both knew it within a fortnight, and we were kind to each other about it in the particular careful way of two people who understand they have made a sensible mistake. She asked for her own chambers by winter. I did not argue. 2 years passed. I ran the pack. I heard no word of Saren. I did not ask. I told myself that was mercy, that asking would be a cruelty, a pulling at something I had no right to anymore. My wolf, when I reached for him, was quiet in a way that felt less like peace and more like punishment. It was a trader from the northern road who undid me. He mentioned making conversation over the fire at a border post that the village of Holtwick had acquired a healer. A young woman, he said. Quiet sort, good with wolves and children both. Had a little boy 2 years old or thereabouts, gray-eyed like a storm. Strange, the trader said, for a woman with brown eyes. I said nothing. I thanked him for the road report and walked out to my horse and stood there with my hand on the saddle. For a long time, gray eyes, 2 years old, I rode north alone. I did not tell my count. I told my second in command that I was making a patrol inspection and would return in 4 days. I rode through 2 nights. Holtwick was small, a scatter of stone houses, a well, a row of drying herbs outside a low doorway at the far end of the lane. I smelled her before I reached the turn. The bond hit me like a door swung open into my chest, cold air and firelight at once. And I pulled my horse up and sat there breathing until I was sure my hands were steady. She was in the yard. She was hanging dried wolfsbane on a cord strung between 2 posts, her back to me, her dark hair braided simply down her back. At her feet, sitting in the snow with the specific contentment of a small child who has been told to stay and has chosen to interpret this liberally, was a boy. He looked up at me. His eyes were exactly the color of mine. I know because I had been told so my entire life. Stormgray, my mother used to say, the color of Ashenvale's sky before the weather breaks. He studied me with that frank, measuring look that very young children and very old wolves share, and then he went back to whatever he was doing with a stick in the snow. Saren turned around. The look on her face lasted only a second, a flash of something that was not quite fear and not quite grief and not quite anger, though it held something of all three, and then it was gone, and she was composed, as she had always been composed, standing in her own yard in her old coat with her chin level. Calder, she said, not my king. Just my name, Siren. My voice came out rougher than I intended. I rode alone. I told no one. I know. She looked at my horse, unburdened. No guard colors. I can see that. The boy had turned back to watch me. I looked at him and then looked back at her and did not pretend. His name, I said. Emmerich. She said it steadily. He is mine. I've raised him alone, and he is mine. I know, I said. I'm not here to dispute that. Something shifted in her expression. Not softening, exactly. More like she had prepared for a particular fight and found the ground had changed. Under her. Then why are you here? I got down from the horse. I did not think about it. My body simply moved. And then I was standing in the snow in her yard, and I went down on one knee in front of her. Not as a king, not as the Alpha of Ashenvale, just as the man who had made the worst decision of his life in front of the whole pack and had lived 2 years in the quiet punishment of it. Because I was wrong, I said. Because my wolf has not forgiven me, and I have not forgiven myself, and I came to say that to your face. Not to ask anything of you, not to make demands. Just to say it, and to ask if I might. I stopped, started again. To ask if I might know him. Saren looked at me for a long time. The wind moved through the wolfsbane overhead. Emmerich abandoned his stick and came to stand beside his mother, leaning against her leg, looking at me with those gray eyes. You kneel in snow for nothing? she said finally. This is not nothing. She was quiet. Then she said, come inside. I'll hear what you have to say. I will not claim she made it easy. She did not. There was tea and there was a fire, and there was a conversation that lasted the whole of that afternoon and into the evening, and she asked me questions I had no good answers for, and I gave her the answers I had, which were imperfect and honest. I did not invoke the bond. I did not speak of duty or alliance or what the pack required. I spoke only of what I had done and what it had cost, and I left the choice entirely in her hands. Emmerich fell asleep against my side somewhere in the third hour, trusting the way small children trust, before reason teaches them to protect themselves. I sat very still and did not move so as not to wake him. Saren watched that, and something in her finally settled. She came to Ashenville in the spring, when the roads cleared. She came because she chose to, not because I commanded, not because the bond compelled her, not because she had nowhere else to go. She came with her healer's satchel, and her son on her hip and her chin level, exactly as she had left. I stood the full pack in the great hall on the evening she arrived. I stood in the same place I had stood 2 years before, with the same torchlight on the stone, and I said the words that unmade the ones I had spoken. I acknowledged the bond. I acknowledged the error. I named Emmerich, son of Ashenville, before every wolf who had watched his mother walk out into the snow, and I watched their heads bow, not from force, but from the simple weight of a wrong being made right. The alliance match had long since been dissolved quietly, with relief on both sides. Saren stood beside me when the pack bowed. She did not look triumphant. She looked like a woman who had survived something and come through it to a place she had not expected to reach, not vindicated so much as simply finally home. Emmerich, wedged between us, looked at the bowing wolves with the profound satisfaction of a 2-year-old who does not know what is happening, but understands he is at the center of it. I have been a better king since. I cannot explain that easily, except to say that humility is a harder teacher than pride, and a truer one. Saren became Ashenvale's healer in the formal sense, and its Luna in the quiet sense that has nothing to do with titles. The way the pack moved around her, the way the wolves brought her their injured and their young, the way the hall felt warmer in winter. She never asked me to make it formal. I asked her 3 times on 3 separate occasions, plainly and without pressure, and the 3rd time she said yes, and it was the only political act of my life I have not second-guessed for a single moment. On the morning after the naming ceremony, I found Emmerich in the great hall, standing in the middle of the floor where his mother had once stood and accepted a rejection with her chin level. He was not doing anything in particular, just standing there, the way children do when they are thinking something they do not yet have words for. I went and stood beside him, and we looked at the empty hall together. Big room, he says. It is, I agreed. He reached up and took my hand, and we stood there a while longer in the quiet. That is what I kept in the end. Not the crown, not the alliance, not the word of any council. That small hand and the woman in the doorway behind us watching, and the knowledge that I had, by some grace I had not earned, been given the chance to be worthy of them both.